Somewhere beneath the mountains of Iran, engineers are not building weapons to win a war. They are building a system designed to make war impossible to win. A strategy so layered, so patient, and so calculated that even the world's greatest superpowers have spent decades trying to understand it and failing. On the surface, Iran looks like a nation under pressure. Sanctions, isolation, internal protests, a struggling economy. That is exactly what they want you to think. Because while the world was watching Iran's weakness, Iran was engineering its greatest strength. A strategy they call the axis of resistance. And it has already reshaped the Middle East without firing a single bullet at a superpower directly. This is not a story about nukes. This is a story about something far more dangerous: patience. It began in 1979, when Iran did not just change its government, it declared war on the entire world order. They called America the Great Satan. They called Israel a cancer to be removed. These were not just words, they were a roadmap. But Iran had learned something critical from history. Direct confrontation with a superpower means destruction. Iraq tried it. Afghanistan tried it. Libya tried it. All of them were reduced to rubble, their governments erased, their futures stolen. So Iran's supreme leadership made a decision that would define the next 4 decades. They would never fight America directly. Instead, they would build a war that America could not fight back against. What they built next took 20 years, and it is still being deployed right now. The strategy has a name inside military think tanks: forward defense, or more accurately, the proxy network. Iran does not send its own soldiers to fight. It sends ideas, money, weapons, and training, and lets others bleed in its place. Hezbollah, in Lebanon, armed with over 150,000 rockets pointed at Israel. Built, funded, and directed by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC. The Houthis in Yemen, disrupting global shipping lanes, striking Saudi oil fields, forcing the world's most powerful navies to divert their attention and resources. The Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, sitting right next to American military bases. Close enough to strike, close enough to threaten, far enough that Iran maintains plausible deniability. But here is what most people do not understand. These are not just militias. These are divisions in a war Iran has already been fighting for 2 decades, and the battlefield is everywhere. Iranian military doctrine calls this mosaic defense. 1,000 small pieces that individually seem manageable, but together form a picture that no single military power on earth can completely destroy. Fact: Iran has spent an estimated $30 to $40 billion building and maintaining its proxy network over 2 decades. That is less than what the United States spends on its military in 2 weeks. Yet, the disruption caused is incalculable. Fact: the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman, carries 20% of the world's entire oil supply. Iran has rehearsed closing it multiple times. A single closure lasting 30 days could trigger a global economic crisis that would reach every city, every market, and every household on the planet. Fact: in 2020, when the United States assassinated Iran's most powerful general, Qasem Soleimani, the architect of the entire proxy network, Iran did not respond by launching missiles at Washington. They fired a calculated, limited strike on a U.S. base in Iraq, and then they waited. Because in Iran's strategy, waiting is the weapon, patience is the missile, and the war never has to be declared. Fact: Iran's underground missile city, reportedly stretching hundreds of kilometers beneath its mountains, houses ballistic missiles capable of reaching every U.S. base in the Middle East, every Israeli city, and several European capitals. But the most chilling part of Iran's strategy is not the missiles. It is not even the proxies. It is the shadow war, a conflict fought in silence, in cyberspace, in assassinations, and in sabotage. Iranian hackers have breached U.S. banks, Saudi oil infrastructure, Israeli water systems, and American defense contractors. Not to steal secrets, but to send messages. Messages that say, we are already inside. Scientists who worked on programs opposing Iran have died in mysterious circumstances. Explosions have occurred at Israeli military facilities, with no warning. Cyberattacks have shut down critical infrastructure across multiple nations. Tankers in the Persian Gulf have been damaged in the night, and no one officially claimed responsibility. This is the war that never makes headlines. The war that generals brief presidents about, in rooms with no windows and no recording devices. And the most terrifying part is that Iran's leadership has said openly that they do not need to win a war with America. They just need to make the cost of fighting so unbearably high that America chooses to walk away, just like it did in Vietnam, just like it did in Afghanistan. The strategy is not built on victory. It is built on exhaustion. And in the middle of all this geopolitical chess, there are people, human beings, who never chose to be pieces in someone else's strategy. Civilians in Lebanon, who live under a government that answers to Tehran more than it answers to Beirut. Yemenis, surviving inside the world's worst humanitarian crisis. A war ignited by proxy politics and sustained by foreign ambition. Iranians themselves, sanctioned, isolated, watching their currency collapse, while their government funds foreign militias instead of their own hospitals and schools. The true cost of this 20-year strategy is not paid in missiles. It is paid in lives, in futures, in the slow, grinding suffering of millions of ordinary people caught between superpowers playing a game none of them agreed to join. So here is the question that every intelligence agency, every general, and every world leader is sitting with right now. Iran has spent 20 years building a war machine designed specifically to outlast superpowers. Its proxies are armed. Its missiles are ready. Its cyber units are active. Its strategy is patient. And its leadership believes, with absolute conviction, that time is on their side. Can this strategy be stopped? Perhaps, but not easily, not quickly, and not without a cost that no superpower has yet shown it is willing to pay. Because Iran is not preparing for a war that lasts a week. Iran is preparing for a war that lasts a generation. History does not always announce itself with an explosion. Sometimes the most consequential wars begin in silence, in tunnels, in meetings, in decades of calculated preparation. What happens next in the Middle East will not just define a region. It may define the entire century. The question is not whether Iran is ready. The question is whether the rest of the world is even paying attention.